Evening lads. Today we're talking about vintage lenses, in particular the 85-210 by Sun Lenses. Okay, so a little history about this lens. The format is 35mm SLR. It's M42 mount, so it's adaptable for my camera in particular, via the EF to M42 adapter that I've got through Earth. It's f4.5 to f22, so it's pretty decent. I don't know how to tell you the age of it. I'm not sure if it's similar to, say, like the Helios 44 on the side of it. You can go off the serial number, and like the first two digits are the age of it. For example, I'm pretty confident that my Helios is 1981. I don't know if it's the same deal with this Sun lens, but I'll put it on the screen anyway. This is the number of it. I would range it between 1970 and 1990. I would put it in that range, but I don't know per se. Okay, now that we're all familiar with the specs of said lens, let's go out and use it. So I've had this lens for, I would say, a little over a year, maybe two. And I recently, myself and Kate have got an office, you might have seen it in other videos, in Newcastle, and I carved out an afternoon to go down to the foreshore and use this lens for the first time. Well, I have used it in the past, but I haven't actually taken it out and tried to get a vast variety of shots under different lightings. Whereas this particular instance, I was like, nah, I'm going out for the whole afternoon and I'm just shooting with this lens. The first few shots I took of this were down on the foreshore as I was walking down to Nobby's Beach. If you're familiar with Newcastle, you know exactly where I am. So the first shot I took was the tugboats that come up and down the foreshore here and run the harbour. So straight away I noticed this lens was very soft. I mean, I was expecting that. This lens is pretty old. I'm not expecting it to be tack sharp. And I wasn't really disappointed. I'm just letting you know that it didn't seem to be like a smooth roll off, like it was heap sharp in the center and it rolled off from there. It was just kind of a soft image across the board. Whereas you'll see, you compare it to, say, like the Helios 44 at the end here, we'll get into it. It's not too bad in the center, and then it rolls off and gets swirly around the edge. That's the Carl Zeiss formula for you. But this lens in particular seems to be pretty soft across the board. I mean, obviously I'm comparing this to, say, like my RF 70-200, which is a ridiculously unfair comparison. That's one of the best lenses that we own. It's hella sharp, hella fast, and I will throw some comparisons up here at the end. I've got something set aside for that I want to talk about. I was also getting a lot of lens aberrations, or like, you know, halation, if you will, in the image, which is kind of strange. I wasn't really expecting that. I mean, I'm not mad. That's why you're using old glass, is to get this old look. So to get that as a byproduct is like definitely not a bad thing. I mean, technically speaking, it's probably not the best, but you're not putting this lens on your camera expecting to get like this amazing result. You're putting it on there for a reason. Here's where it gets kind of interesting. This lens actually came with two 2x teleconverters. So when you whack that on, you're going to get this ridiculous focal range. For this next shot, I'm stood in exactly the same spot, and here it is at, say, 210, and here it is at, you know, like 600 to 800 mil at my best estimate. It's ridiculous. The focal throw you can get off this thing with this teleconverter is insane. And I'll get more into it in a sec, because from there, headed kept going and went down to Nobby's Beach, and I've never actually shot that, as crazy as that sounds. I've never actually taken the time to go down there and shoot that for photography. So that was interesting going down there. One of the things I noticed was we were getting this crazy swell come through from all this rain that we've had recently. So I was actually able to throw this teleconverter on and try and shoot the swell, which I've never actually done, because I've never had a lens that would throw that far. I'm just maxed out at 70-200. So to have something that would go further than that was actually pretty cool. So this is my first ever attempt at shooting barrels and waves and stuff, which is pretty interesting. I wouldn't say that like I enjoyed it. It's not a photography that I would get into, but I took it off and I grabbed a few shots, just classic shots of Nobby's Beach, trying to get the 4 in the background. And I was noticing that the color coming through the lens was actually pretty decent. Like I wasn't getting any cast come through, like purple, yellow, green. It was pretty sweet. I was getting nothing that was unrecoverable, I would guess you would say. And the color reproduction in post was fine. Like here's some of the images, some of my favorite ones from down there on Nobby's. So finally after this, I was headed back downtown to link up with Kate to have a drink at the QT. And this is where I really enjoy using telephotos like zoom lenses, like my 70-200 in particular, is in cities like this when you zoom straight down a street. So I'll throw up a couple photos that I took for, say, an engagement shoot, and I'll show you what I'm trying to do. Like you're trying to pull the buildings forward and compress it on your subject. And I really enjoy doing that. And I wanted to see how this lens would go with something like that. And it done a pretty good job. I'm pretty happy with the images I was getting from it. It was way harder to focus, obviously, than the RF, but anyway. Now, little bonus. When I was down at the Newcastle Baths, I threw on the Helios 44M, which is, if you're not aware, was my favorite lens of all time. I picked that up when I was in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I've made an entire video based specifically on this lens when I was in Paris last year. I'll link it above and below if you want to go check that out. So the Helios 442, 44M, like all these lenses, that lens range there, they're specifically known for their like swirly bokeh and their lens flares, specifically at, say, f2. I think if you go any higher, literally, even if you go to the next click, you're not going to get that effect. It's only at f2. So for that reason, most of the time I'm shooting at f2 and then just cranking the shutter. If it's for video, you can throw an ND filter on. There's ways around it, but I would just stick to f2. The reason I really like it for this swirly bokeh effect is because it's really good for a 58mm, which is more like a portrait lens, to get good subject isolation and make the background interesting at the same time. So I used it here at the baths because I thought it would be a really good way to show off. So for this particular afternoon, the whole bath was just flooded because of this swell that's been coming through. So it was really good to isolate and show like the steps were underwater, and so were all the diving blocks. So they're not what I would consider to be the most interesting photo, but because of this lens, it draws your attention and the viewer's eye to certain parts of the image, and you have control over that because of the lens. Yeah, it's just the fall off that you get from this lens from the center of the image outwards when you get this bokeh effect coming in really allows you to hone in and go, that's what I want you to look at. But then it makes the entire image as a whole quite interesting, and it's unmatched, man. Like this is my favorite lens. I use it all the time, even professionally. I wouldn't use it obviously as a lead lens, but I use it as soon as I've got the good ones in the bag. I'm doing this. Now, philosophically, just for a moment, if you will indulge me, why would you get this lens or lenses like these, for example, when you could have, the modern glass that's going to give you a better, faster, more consistent result? For me, to answer that, I have to explain something really quick to you. About almost 12 months ago, I deleted Instagram, like completely purged it from my life. And that had a pretty profound sort of impact on my photography. I'll explain. So what I mean by that is I no longer have sort of input coming at me from like different locations. So if I was to shoot the Merriweather Baths, you might get on Instagram, look it up, and try and find other people that have shot that location. And then you might be inclined, without even knowing it, to show up and try and take the exact same shot or a similar version of that shot. Whereas if you don't have that input, you're just rocking up and you're just taking, the photos that matter to you. Like, cause that's what I'm doing. I'm rocking up now to these places, or I'm thinking, do I even want to get my camera out? Because now I don't have a client. I don't have people that are going to be looking at my work. It's just me. Every photo I take is just me. It's for me. So whenever I'm taking these photos now, I'm thinking to myself, do I even care enough about this photo to take it? Like, because I'm the only one that's going to be looking at it. Yeah, Kate might see it and other people, but if you just have the sort of mindset, this photo like is for me. I'm gonna maybe potentially, you know, put it in a coffee book, and then I'm gonna look at it in 10 or 20 years. If you take photos with that intentionality, then you're only gonna take photos that really matter to you. So that's why going forward to these lenses, I personally choose to shoot with lenses like this, because they're gonna lend towards images that are sort of blurry, slightly out of focus, imperfect. Like, I'm looking for these aspects, these attributes in lenses and cameras that give me these looks and these vibes, because that to me is how a memory is. It's not perfect. You don't remember everything exactly how it was. And that's how I want my photography to come across. Like, I'm not saying I want my photography to look bad. I'm saying I want it to invoke a feeling of a time and a place. And I feel like that's what these lenses are really good for. Would you use them professionally? Like, absolutely not. I use them professionally for weddings and engagements and events after I've used my full professional modern lenses that get the shot. I could go on and on and on about this. I think that people want this, they want this look, they want this vibe, but then they'll also simultaneously want the pro images, the ones that were shot professionally, the ones that were shot with the modern lenses, the modern looks, and then they also want this vintage stuff just kind of on top. They just think that can just happen. I'm going off track. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on this topic for vintage lenses. Hope you enjoyed it. If you're thinking about getting this lens, let me know, or if you already have it, or if you have any other lens recommendations, to be fair. I would like to get sort of a vintage lens that's sort of wider field of view, because right now I've got the Helios 58 and then I've got this, which is obviously like a zoom lens, telephoto. So I'd like something like between 20 and 50 mil would be great. If you did like this, feel free to subscribe, like all the stuff. I'll be posting way more frequently now because I have a dedicated office space in Newcastle with Kate, and I'll have a little bit more spare time coming up shortly to shoot more of this stuff. All right, be good.